It's a victory that capped a dramatic turnaround for the incumbent president Tsai Ing-Wen of the Democratic Progressive Party. She won the recently concluded Taiwan's presidential election by a landslide. Tsai Ing-wen garnered 57%, or 8.2 million of the valid ballots cast, 1.3 million more than her 2016 presidential election. Her closest rival, Han Kuo-yu of the Kuomintang, secured 39%, or some 5.5 million votes, almost 20 percentage point gap between him and Tsai. Tsai's party, the DPP, also maintained its majority in parliament. It secured 61 out of 113 seats, while the KMT won 38 seats, giving her a clear mandate to push forward her agenda and vision for the next 4 years. What led to President Tsai's impressive victory? And what's next for Han Kuo-yu and the KMT after the painful defeat? Welcome to a special edition of Insight, where we will analyze the impact of the recently concluded Taiwan presidential election and what lies ahead for the next 4 years. I'm Genevieve Wu, and today joining me are Dr. Chang Ching, advisor to the KMT, Michael Cole, senior fellow at the Global Taiwan Institute, Dr. Yen Jiafa, advisor to the DPP, and last but not least, Dr. Catherine Zheng of the East Asian Institute. Now, let me kick this off by saying the obvious. 57% of the popular vote. That's 8 million votes for President Tsai Ing-wen, 1.3 million votes more than what she had in 2016. Now, let's talk about reaction. You know, was this too much? Was this too little? Was it just about right? And I'm going to throw that open to the opposition party, advisor to the KMT, Dr. Chang, or CC.
Yes.
What's your reaction when you saw that number?
I was expect Han Kuo-yu is going to win because according to the social phenomenon, which is totally conflict with the poll survey before the election, and eventually which also contrasted to the final result. But the fail is the fail, but the victory is belongs to all the citizens in Taiwan. So I would like to say the KMT will not play, will respect the Tsai Ing-wen's government's leadership, will not play as a role of the backseat driver, and we hope that we can totally working together to secure all the welfare of the citizens.
So, your reaction was a surprise because you thought Han Kuo-yu was going to win. Let me ask the DPP advisor, what was your reaction when you saw the margin of Tsai Ing-wen's win?
I was also very surprised.
Also surprised?
Surprised.
Why?
But that's because that margin is too big.
Too big?
Too big. Because, but of course, our prediction was that Tsai would win, but not win so much.
What a modest expectation. Can you explain?
Yeah, because in Taiwan, this green and the blue camps are very balanced. And the determining factors will be the middle votes and the young people. But I didn't expect, earlier we expected Tsai could win about 1.5 million votes. So that's what I said, surprise. But so you will see that more some of the KMT heavyweights just focus on the legislative elections because they know that Han Kuo-yu had no hope for the election. That's my
Catherine, what about you?
Yeah, I also would like to concur with Dr. Yen because I'm expecting actually a kind of fierce battle between these two candidates. But I also bet on Tsai Ing-wen to win, but with a smaller margin, not like this big. But I observed that very interesting that this time it is still blue and green confrontation. But it seems that Han Kuo-yu, I have to say, I think he did quite okay in the context that the KMT whole party, maybe CC is going to object me, but I see that the whole party is not geared up to support Han. So it is actually, I would describe, kind of a systemic failure or systemic burden to Han and also to legislative elections. So in this context, I would say Hangul did quite okay, honestly.
Okay, we'll pick that up a little bit later on what happened to KMT in the elections. And Michael, what did you feel about the number?
Right. Well, to go to your initial question, I don't think there ever is too much democracy. The fact that we had large numbers and a higher turnout than in 2016, to me is encouraging. The numbers itself, the margin demonstrates that, well, several things. Tsai's, the outcome was very much contingent on the youth voter turnout. And we knew that overwhelmingly young people in Taiwan tend to support the policies that President Tsai has proposed in the past 4 years. A bit more socially conservative, legalization of same-sex marriage, and a Taiwan that is more outward-looking, if you will, in its engagement and diversification of allies. I think the Taiwanese, with this particular election, spoke loudly and clearly that this is the nature of the country that they want for themselves. I also like the fact that in her victory speech, President Tsai also emphasized the point that you just made. The Taiwanese, the 23 million people of Taiwan, need to be congratulated for participating in that experiment, and that she, from now on, and she has been since 2016, is responsible not only for the people who voted for her, but for the whole 23 million people as well. So I see Mr. Han did surprisingly well in terms of numbers. I think he faces an uphill battle within the party right now because he did adopt some techniques that raised questions about his intentions. But now this is an issue for the KMT to resolve. And the KMT will also have to demonstrate that it's willing to play along as a responsible party in opposition, and that they can all work together to make Taiwan successful in the next 4 years.
Right. Now, speaking of the young voters, which largely we agree contributed to the big win for President Tsai, I want to look a little bit also about the new parties that have gained ground in the parliament. So that is also a new trend. Are the two related? More youths supporting Tsai, and then more of these new younger independent parties in the Legislative Yuan who has now more support? Maybe Catherine, you can comment.
My observation is that for this younger voter, younger generation, there is a very interesting trend that to them, Taiwan and ROC, these two concepts, somehow can conciliate. Because for the previous generation, if you talk more about Taiwan, you mean, or you are for Taiwan independence. That is no room, or you have no discussions with people supporting for ROC. But for this young voter, yes, they agree. Taiwan is ROC. So that creates the room for them to, I mean, that shape their aspiration to what the political leaders mean for them. And a political leader, appropriate one for them is, first of all, at crisis moment, the leader has to stand out very staunchly, very clearly to defend the Taiwanese sovereignty, just as what Tsai is doing.
Okay, CC, I want to throw the question to you because the electoral support for the KMT traditionally comes from an older generation. So with this new wave of the youth vote, what does that mean for KMT?
Well, I would like to say there's all these kinds of political preferences is actually a dynamic process. So generation to generation, their perception about the identity will be very different. Well, Taiwan, or where you say the Republic of China is de facto separated from the mainland China. I would say that if we overgeneralize, say the young people vote for the green camp, or the old people vote for the blue camp, that's the oversimplified issue. Actually, the structure of the voter is much more complicated than that.
All right. And now we'll take a short break, and we'll come back for more. Stay tuned. Taiwan President Tsai Ing-Wen's stunning victory at the polls was a remarkable political comeback, both for her and the party, the DPP. In November 2018, Tsai's party, the DPP, was routed by KMT in the municipal elections, and it was widely predicted that she would lose the 2020 presidential election. But suddenly, the months-long unrest in Hong Kong gave a much-needed boost to Tsai's sagging popularity. The US-China trade war has also been a boon to Taiwan's economy, giving Tsai an unexpected lucky break. Taiwan's economy continued an upward trajectory in 2019, growing at more than 2%, outperforming many other Asian economies. Tsai Ing-Wen astutely caught the mood and anxiety of the Taiwanese voters in the wake of the Hong Kong unrest and the US-China trade war, turning adversity into a winning formula. But was it a case of shrewd political strategy or pure luck? Welcome back. You're watching a special episode of Insight on the post-Taiwan election analysis. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Han Kuo-yu and KMT in this election. Now, he was a very colorful character, arising from his meteoric rise from the November 2018 local elections. But in the last months leading up to the presidential election, he seemed to have struggled a little bit and lost ground. Let's analyze why that happened, what went wrong. Maybe the DPP can start with this. What was your analysis of what went wrong with the KMT strategy, or Han Kuo-yu?
Okay, let me echo Zhang Jun's first. I think he's right. It's very difficult for us to generalize the voting behavior. It's very complicated. But I think the middle voters are very special in this election because they get tied up the traditional politicians. So they are very independent. But when we talk about the cross-strait relations, they know that Taiwan is an independent country. So they will tend to a little bit to the green color. That's why Han Kuo-yu lost some votes. And regarding the young voters, they are very independent, just like our family education. We all treat our kids in a very democratic way. So sometimes they will not follow the rules set by the parties or politicians. They are very independent. So they have been very strongly influenced by the Hong Kong protests. They know that there's an outcome of one country, two system. So why should we accept the one country, two system from Beijing? So I think in this regard, Han Kuo-yu did not respond the one country, two system formula directly or clearly. So that's why people did not really trust him.
Interesting. And KMT, I think you will be doing a lot of soul searching now. The party is a little bit of a crossroads now. What is your analysis of what went wrong this time?
First, I would like to address we are not only fail for the young generation, we fail to get the votes from every generation. We are very honest to face this catastrophic way of failure. We would like to admit that we fail to understand the whole society. Mayor Han, he has a very quick response about some trivial issue, but for the mega policy, it's not his cat. They were still in the party, so the chairman Wu is failed to take the party slide toward the incidents in Hong Kong or any other outside factor. But as I say, the failure is failure. We admit that this is terrible, but we learn from that, and we also concern, and we encourage the DPP to take the responsibility to engage with Beijing, and we send our best wishes to, if you can, if you don't like the 1992 consensus, try to create one, because so we cannot ignore that China is not exist. We must do something to engage with China. But if you try to keep on distort about Beijing or the political signal, try to serve your political interest, there's no space for the positive interaction. That we are really concerned about that. But we are encouraged people, we cannot simply ignore China. Simply is so big next to us.
Okay, Michael, what do you think of that? The failure to respond or quickly respond to major events, was that a factor?
Well, one major issue with the Han camp, from my perspective, is that Han Kuo-yu did not actually propose any concrete policies. His approach was quite reminiscent of that taken by Donald Trump in the United States. So a mix of populism, expressions of disillusionment with existing parties, hewing to a more socially conservative line, tapping into discontent among retired military officers, retired civil servants, who, for example, saw their pensions cut under President Tsai, who did not seem to appreciate the generational justice that the DPP government was aiming for. And there was a quite substantial campaign of disinformation as well on social media, traditional media as well, which could very well have succeeded had the Taiwanese public not become more aware, not only of the mechanisms that are being used, but the potential effects on the quality of their democracy. President Tsai certainly tried to focus more on policy, but unfortunately we ended up with an electoral campaign where there was not a lot of policy discussion. Another thing that certainly hurt Mayor Han is the fact that he succeeded with his rhetoric in alienating a lot of mainstream KMT, so the elite, the educated, the wealthy, and particularly in northern Taiwan, a good number of them simply stopped mobilizing for him. So there was a bit of a civil war within the KMT as well. A lot of traditional KMT members did not like the fact that an outlier had seemed to hijack their party. So he lost a lot of support among his own party as well.
Right. The Hong Kong factor, the big turmoil going on for months and months, how big was that a factor towards Tsai Ing-Wen's win? Catherine?
I would say that Tsai Ing-Wen actually played this card very well, or sovereignty card, and not just Hong Kong, all the way to the beginning of the 2019, the Xi statement. That, I would say, that was a very critical moment. And Tsai responded quickly and efficiently. And I also want to echo and concur with Dr. Yan, and also Michael's opinion, that I call this group, these are the forces that have the common understanding based on the Taiwanese subjectivity. And that straddles from mild green, middle vote, and also mild blue. And right now, I also observe that there are some younger generation voters in the mild blue. They are willing to move a little bit to the middle, or even to vote for the green candidate. This is kind of extraordinary, because in the generation that we view them as green and blue, it is unlikely for them to vote for the other side of the candidate. But again, I would say that for the sovereignty card, put very briefly, for this group, based on the common understanding of Taiwanese subjectivity, they ask for, first of all, they know that the cross-strait wrestling is going to last for decades, perhaps the most, the great time for their whole life. So they want to see someone who had clear position facing China. That's the first condition. The second condition, again, then we have to cultivate national development so we can sustain on in this wrestling. So I would say that is, I think this election, the Xi statement, also the Hong Kong protest, that is great lessons for Tsai. And this is the critical issue she has to work on, the national development. Yes. Okay.
Now, the US-China trade war, that was the other external factor that many people felt that strengthened Tsai Ing-Wen's hand. Of course, it's nothing that she did, but it was an external factor that strengthened her, because she was criticized heavily in the 2018 local election that she did not have a grip on the economy. But with the US-China trade war, Taiwan became an unexpected beneficiary of the fallout. So was it luck, or was it strategy that strengthened her hand with regards to this?
I think these are both factors. One is that actually you will see that Tsai has had a very good industrial policy or economic policy, like defense industry, or like the upgrading the high-tech industries, so on and so forth. So basically, she has a very comprehensive blueprint for the economic development. And based on this foundation, then the external factor can take effect. For example, when the trade tension between China and US was rising up, then the decoupling effect also made some Taiwanese investors, when came back to Taiwan, that boost the economy, like the stock market has reached 12,000 points. So this is a historical record. And so I think not just because the lucky factors, but also I believe that President Tsai, has had a very, very good but silent reform of the economy.
If I may jump in here, the main issue is not so much GDP growth or the stock market. These are all abstracts. These grab the headlines in the media. But what the main issue is, and that was a factor in the 2018 elections, is one of wealth distribution. No matter how great the GDP is doing at the moment, if young people cannot afford to buy a house in major cities, that remains an issue. And that has been a problem for the KMT. That has been a problem for the DPP. Actually, wealth distribution, again, is a point that she raised in her acceptance speech on election night on Saturday. And to your question on the trade war, it has benefited Taiwan for economic reasons, but also because it's part of an even larger context in which Washington, D.C. and other countries around the world, primarily democracies, are reassessing their engagement with China. The international community is becoming a little bit more skeptical of Beijing's intentions, particularly under Xi Jinping, of the impact of working with China on their own democracies, their institutions and whatnot. So Taiwan cannot but benefit from that shift in perceptions through engagement, through new economic possibilities. And we have seen that. And President Tsai is fortunate that she happens to be president during that period, but she also seizes those opportunities to try to diversify Taiwan's economic engagement.
Excellent. On this point, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to touch on a very important but prickly issue of cross-strait relations. Thanks for staying with Insight. You're watching a special edition where we're talking about the post-Taiwan elections analysis. Now, when it comes to Taiwan, we cannot run away from cross-strait relations with the mainland, and it's always come to define general elections one way or the other. So when Taiwan won her re-election this time, noticeably, China did not send congratulations. In fact, it sent a statement to remind her of the one China policy of reunification and one country, two systems. What do you make of China's reaction to Tsai's win? Maybe, Michael, you can start.
Certainly. Well, it's not very surprising. The first thing is it does seem to indicate that once again the Chinese Communist Party simply does not understand democracy or refuses to understand democracy. In my view, it's a refusal to see the reality in Taiwan and to adapt in many ways through its rhetoric over the years, and particularly the harsh line that has been adopted by General Secretary Xi. The CCP has painted itself into a corner. As we know, the Chinese Communist Party will not admit that it has been wrong, that its policy on Taiwan over the past decades has been, in my opinion, a complete failure. But for General Secretary Xi to admit that his policy was a failure would have consequences for his ability to remain in power in China. Therefore, the only thing that he can do is continue to insist on a policy of restricting Taiwan's international space, trying to undermine its democratic institutions, with the hopes that at some point they will be able to create conditions that are suitable for the reunification of Taiwan with China. But if China maintains that time it's on its side, the generational shift in demographics in Taiwan certainly are pointing in the opposite direction. So hopefully we'll see leadership, a more enlightened leadership at some point in Beijing that acknowledges that they need to completely rethink their approach to Taiwan. Otherwise, we're all going to be in serious trouble in years to come.
All right, Jianfao, what did the DPP make of China's reaction?
Okay, may I put a footnote to Michael's point? I think not only Beijing does not understand democracy, they does not want democracy. Xi Jinping has publicly announced that they have their own democracy, but democracy is not a check and balance model. That's a party ruling model. So basically, I don't think, probably he understands, but he will not follow the democratic ways. So that's the gap. And as for our policy, I mean, DPP policy, I think we will make this government or this party be a responsible stakeholder in this region. So that's why Tsai announced that 4 slogans: peace, dialogue, democracy, and also equality. Equality means if we are going to dialogue, we have to be based upon equal footings. So I think that's a language that could be understood by the international community. But if follow up with Zhang Jun's point, he said that we have to learn how to live with China. I think probably my conclusion is converse. China has to learn how to get with Taiwan, because defending the sovereignty is a basic precondition for us. That's not our fault. So I think we should be very responsible for the regional peace, but we cannot just lose our sovereignty, autonomy, just to appease China.
But if the Taiwan embraced and practiced democracy in a perfect condition and more willing to coupling with the mainland, then there will be another story. But well, the reality proves otherwise. Then they will become somehow very embarrassing. Whether the democracy can be some attractive incentive to the people in mainland, they will decide the regional stability and even the future of China. Because the situation is not a matter that I like. It's not necessary for me to like you or for you to like me. But for God's sake, we must learn how to live together. We must be very pragmatic. So how to solve this issue? That will be the challenge. Now, especially now they put the 1992 consensus, they put the equal sign to the one country, two system. Actually, from the 1992 consensus, they have already been functional. Otherwise, there's no subsequent 22 accords. So, if anyone would like revise, this is not something permanent. It's only just a starting point. And if you would like to have further engagement with China, it's welcome for the DPP try their efforts to build another consensus or whatsoever understanding. We, as a KMT, as long as it is beneficial, mutually beneficial, we are all agreeing with that. As long as which may serve our interest for all the people in Taiwan, well, you can reach a certain understanding with Beijing. That will also be fine.
Catherine, what do you make of China's reaction to the polls?
I want to bring in a very interesting observation I have. I talk to a lot of young people in China and asking them, how do you understand democracy? And it seems that very interesting for the younger generation or common people in China, they actually understand democracy as meritocracy. They actually see that if this procedure or these practices can guarantee us a capable leadership, not a leader like Trump, not the chaotic situation in Taiwan, then that is what they understand democracy. So applying this to the Chinese reaction to Taiwan's election outcome, I would say that actually the Chinese government is still learning also from Taiwan's democratic practices for all these years. First of all, apparently that the CCP, they want to consolidate their ruling, one-party ruling. So they try to figure out that what democracy really is and how that is going to be practiced in the Chinese society. And if the Taiwanese experiences can have any, if they can learn anything from Taiwanese experiences, and if that really happens in China, how can they deal with that? But again, I would say that this is the Chinese version of democracy. I'm not surprised because I'm actually trained as an international law scholar, and they have their own versions of how international law should be and should be practiced. So that is my little footnote. So anyway, I wouldn't say that China rejects democracy, but it seems that they are still looking for a definition that is okay for them and that is practical for them. And right now, it seems that there's a long way to go.
Okay. In her victory speech, now President Tsai, one of the first things she said, she hopes for talks to resume with China, even after almost 4 years of no official dealings with China. What is Tsai's strategy here? Going forward, cross-strait relations, the next 4 years, what can we expect of Tsai's cross-strait strategy?
Yes, Tsai said that, but I also want to emphasize that Tsai has a precondition for the dialogue across strait. She said that if the PRC government is willing to exist and accept the de facto rulings of ROC in Taiwan. And that's the fact, that's the reality. On that condition, then the peaceful dialogue can go on. And I would say that these greatly alleviate the concerns of the deep green forces in Taiwan. Because the deep green forces, they support Lai Ching-te, but they somehow are willing to support Tsai Ing-Wen, because then Lai Ching-te becomes Tsai Ing-Wen's partner. Mm-hmm. But I have to say that there are still very deep concern for these deep green forces. That is peaceful agreement, which implies on the one country, two system. Mm-hmm. And Tsai actually can be more aggressive. Tsai can propose this condition and this peaceful dialogue well before her victory. But she is very cautious, so it is reasonable why she only announced that after she wins the campaign. So I would say that at this moment, Tsai is quite smart. She is, first of all, she gathered a great number of votes and having a new mandate, and then she kind of showing a nice gesture to the deep green forces. For cross-strait relations, I would say for Tsai, she doesn't, I mean, she has done everything she can do. So right now she can step back and then see what the Beijing reacts, what the external context will help her.
Yeah, Tsai has been hewing to the middle ground. Basically, and she's consistently said Republic of China-Taiwan, as if those were inseparable elements. And in doing so, she's captured the people who are Taidu, so supporting Taiwanese independence. But she's also captured a large number of people who are Huadu, who are Republic of China independents. And what she's aiming for, and this is oftentimes not recognized enough within Taiwanese society, it's all the overlapping values and interests that people associate with the ROC and people associate with Taiwan have in common. And the way of life, a liberal democratic way of life, values, civic notions and all that, what defines Taiwan or the ROC today, this is what she's aiming for. And that's the reason why the deep green elements within her party have expressed discontent in recent years, because they felt that she was not moving fast enough towards name rectification, referenda on possible de jure independence. She understands full well that if she were to move in that direction, that would give Beijing the ammunition it needs to take action against Taiwan, and very likely she would lose the support of important partners within the international community who do not want to see these kinds of surprises that previous presidents in Taiwan have flirted with in past years. And she's fully aware that that would not be good for Taiwan's interest. Right. But she also needs to recognize that there is a large number of people in Taiwan who identify as citizens of the ROC, and she needs to respect that she is their president as well.
Right. Now, understanding the mood on the ground about the large Taiwanese, I suppose, reaction to this identity, say Taiwan versus China identity, the KMT, how do they accept then, or can they accept or reconcile with Tsai's strategy of engagement with China?
No, I would like to argue with that now either Republic of China or Republic of Taiwan, all the things in between, whether you call Republic of China in Taiwan, Republic of China on Taiwan, Republic of China, Taiwan, is only a description. It's not a legitimate definition. Let's make it clear. If you want to go for independent, of course you can do that. You must pay for that. But you cannot always use the name of a Republic of China and keep the autonomous. That can last for perhaps 30 years or 50 years. But in a long history, you must have clear definition. There's nothing in between, either Republic of Taiwan or Republic of China. Okay, but the problem is that, well, of course, we decline about one country, two system. But if you politically, well, use some kind of scheme, make this society much more conservative and authoritarian, then you go to two country, one system, and prepare for one country, one system. So this is what I'm saying, that you must, to a certain point, perhaps not this 50 years, perhaps the next 50 years, to some time, you must make a choice, Republic of China or Republic of Taiwan. Not always the playing around the words, the Republic of China, Taiwan, there's something in between.
So looking forward then, with Tsai Ing-Wen re-elected as Taiwan's president for the next 4 years, what can we expect for cross-strait relations in the next 4 years? Michael?
I personally expect more of what we've seen in the previous 4 years, notwithstanding the fact that President Tsai has opened the door again for dialogue. Again, if we see sudden enlightenment in the CCP, we might see a policy shift in Beijing. I don't expect to see this, which leads me to conclude we're going to see more military coercion exercises by the PLA around Taiwan, possibly crossing the median line again. We will see continued political warfare attempts to undermine institutions, democracy, to balkanize Taiwan, so break the bond between central government and the local levels across Taiwan, where the Chinese have been working already. More efforts at co-optation, business individuals, the media, ordinary citizens and whatnot. Very likely efforts to poach more of Taiwan's official diplomatic allies, possibly more pressure on unofficial allies who in recent years have increased their engagement with Taiwan, all of which is part of a psychological warfare campaign against the Taiwanese to, again, re-emphasize notions of inevitability, the futility of resistance, and as I said earlier, to create conditions under which unification on Beijing's terms would be more likely. To go back very quickly to the previous point, the Taiwanese are very pragmatic. They see China as an opportunity if those exist. I think Beijing makes a very serious mistake if it believes that by encouraging young Taiwanese to go work or study in China, that suddenly they're going to change their identity. These people are going there for their own lives, but the Taishang, the people who go work in China, they do this because they want to contribute to their own country as well. The money goes back to Taiwan, right? So again, I wish we would see a shift in Beijing, because otherwise I really don't foresee a peaceful conclusion to all of this in the next few years.
Okay, next few years then it seems like continued the tensions with China, China-Taiwan relations. So Catherine, how well do you think Tsai Ing-Wen can handle this?
Honestly, I'm thinking that Tsai Ing-Wen right now, I think she has to focus on the domestic policy reform to push further. So I am actually expecting that Tsai is not going to prioritize the cross-strait relations or cross-strait exchanges in the short term, because right now she has actually a lot of important issues to continue on policy reform or to strengthen or to enhance the Taiwan-U.S. relation, because immediately after the election, then the AIT representative is asking Tsai Ing-Wen about the importation of the U.S. beef, those products. So I would say that for Tsai right now, I don't think that in the short term she is going to take more proactive posture in pushing further cross-strait relation, because she has, in her opinion, she has already, the ball is right now in Beijing.
Okay.
So
on that, we'll take a very short break. When we come back, we're going to look ahead on what lies ahead for the next 4 years and the future challenges that the Tsai Ing-Wen government will face. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Insight. Now, Tsai Ing-Wen has won her re-election bid and she will be president for the next 4 years. We'd like to know now what are the major challenges that she will face and how will she overcome them. Let's start with the advisor to DPP.
In the general sense, I think because the people gave her so many votes, this is a responsibility but also a burden, because she has to do a very good job in the 4 years. So if she cannot do a good job, then they will influence the next candidate for 2024 for the TPP candidate. So I think she has to do more. But I think I agree with her that she will focus more on domestic affairs and also on internationalization of Taiwan. And as for cross-strait relations, I think she will maintain the status quo, no provocation. And of course, she has to do more and more like risk management with China. And that's all. I think that's what she can do so far.
Okay, Catherine?
I would say that economy restructuring, that Tsai Ing-Wen has to respond to people who suffer greatly, who had encountered economy difficulties every moment in their life. And these are people in like having disadvantaged political economy positions in the society. So I would say that the first issue Tsai has to deal with is try to create more opportunity or try to vitalize the economy activities locally. So very critical, yeah.
Well, it's certainly hard to single out the single policy priority, and I agree with everything that's been said before, and that's why it's so challenging to be in government, is that you have expectations coming from different groups within society, and for them there are certain things that are more important than others. But if you ask me, building upon what was said earlier, I think one of the greatest challenges that President Tsai will face in the next 4 years is subsequent to the implementation of anti-infiltration laws in Taiwanese parliament to counter foreign influences and political warfare and sharp power, as we call it, is to ensure that, and combating disinformation, is to ensure that these policies and mechanisms are implemented in a way that does not undermine the very democratic values that define Taiwan. We have seen this throughout the years with governments responding to the 9/11 attacks, for example. Anti-terrorism laws sometimes threaten to undermine the viability of our democratic institutions. So the government will need to be able to find the proper balance to defend Taiwan against external meddling, but at the same time to strengthen, reinforce, and consolidate democracy in Taiwan.
Right. Okay, very quickly then, in a nutshell, do you foresee Taiwan's future to be better or worse in the next 4 years, or pretty much status quo? Catherine.
I would say it's promising, because there are two reasons supporting my observation. First of all, the Taiwanese started to know who we are. Who we are means that, yes, we have the Chinese ancestor. We have all this legacy and we have the culture, but then we are living in Taiwan, and that's consolidated by the practices of every 4 years we elect the leader and the realistic living experiences that we share with people on the island. So first of all, we started to know who we are, then we can define or we can convince the international community that we are different from people in the mainland. And right now, the democracy consolidates and people started to learn. So that takes time. So to me, it's promising, but of course, I know that we have to work hard to encounter a lot of obstacle and unification within the society. Yes,
yes, I'm optimistic because Taiwan has worked very hard to be a good student in the international community. So if we can adhere to the democratic rules and to work harder, I think we will be very safe and also supported by the international community.
I am extremely strong optimistic about our future because I personally will pass the worst time. I served at the front lines. I've been aimed, logged on by their missiles before. We will not go back to that time period. But I would also like to remind everyone here is that the homogeneity of the culture cannot guarantee the political unification. On the other hand, the annihilation of the culture, you try to create some different culture, cannot guarantee about the political separation. Culture is culture. Politics is politics. We all need to effort and go through this democratic process that we had just happened in Taiwan. I have extremely strong optimistic about our future.
Michael?
I'm optimistic. I think the Taiwanese have once again demonstrated that they're resilient, that they embrace democratic values. I'm a bit worried about the polarizing forces that were unleashed in this particular election, and by one candidate that tapped into that darker side of Taiwanese society. I do hope that in the next 4 years, the government, the opposition, and civil society will find ways to get rid of that unhealthy polarization that undermines Taiwan. The one uncertain variable, obviously, is how Beijing will react. If they do decide to adopt a much harsher position, if they were to conclude that force is needed and that the situation is now possible for them to unleash those forces against Taiwan, then obviously Taiwan, the region, and possibly the rest of the world would be in for troubled times.
Relations with China look like it will continue to remain tense as the mainland doesn't care for Tsai's pro-independence narrative and her rejection of the one country, two systems principle. Now, how this will impact on Taiwan's economy and ultimately on the people's well-being remains to be seen. But since the people have chosen Tsai, it would appear that the Taiwanese have taken into consideration the China factor, and for better or for worse, will have to bear the consequences together with their re-elected leader. And that concludes our special edition of Insight of the post-Taiwan election analysis.